Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here in the Philippines. My name is Shi Chuan, and today my topic will be web movements in China. So it's more like a more general topic here. And first, let me make a self-introduction about myself. And I am a founder of a wedding planning platform in China, and it's a startup company I co-founded with a couple of friends. And I'm also a partner of a game development company in Beijing. And I basically do coding at my spare time. So I'm a creator of a JS Patterns collection. At first, I do it as a self-reference, but somehow after I published to GitHub, it has been used by a lot of people, and it becomes a quite popular collection right now on GitHub. And if you find it interesting, you can check it out on GitHub. It basically collects all the JavaScript patterns, like jQuery patterns, and a lot of object creation patterns as well. And in the past, I initialized the boilerplate project for the smartphones. And it was originally developed with PowerIris and Divya. And now, because I have my own startup running, and I didn't have much time, but it's carried on by Alex Gibson and many other developers who continue to work on this project. And I'm also a book author of HTML5 Mobile Development Cookbook, and I also reviewed book for the same publisher in the past. And since this is JSConf.Asia, I just want to talk about something in Asia. So I want to talk about something about the web development in China. And here's like the browser stacks in China right now. It looks a bit depressing because it seems like IE8 and IE6 are still kind of like the most popular browsers. Chrome is catching up in the country. But even though HTML5 is not that well supported in the region yet, but somehow the big web companies and startups are trying really hard to work on cross-platform solutions, as well as using HTML5 in a lot of web applications. And first, I want to talk about like HTML5 in like big tech companies in China. It's like Alibaba is one of the biggest e-commerce website. It's basically a combination of Amazon.com and PayPal in China. So it's really huge, and recently it's converted all its HTML5 tags to all its HTML tags to HTML5 thematics. Tencent is another huge company, and it starts as a chat application, a desktop software. But after it gained popularity in the country, it has developed into a web platform, and it's almost like a web version of the operating system. I just want to do like a couple of demos of how it works. So it basically has like photo editors and music players, and it has like a clock, and of course it's chat system on this web OS as well. And basically it developed like RSS readers and like music box and video players as well, all in one web browser. I'm sorry. And recently, it uses all the latest like HTML5 technologies. For instance, it used the notification API for its chat system, and it also uses the geolocation API for its map, and the audio API for its music player. And for this core chat application online, it uses WebSocket by default for browsers that support HTML5, and it uses Flash-enabled Flash sockets for browsers that doesn't support HTML5 browsers, and it uses like long pooling for like no Flash browsers. And of course, it uses like CSS3 Video API, Canvas API, and WebGL for its games and other applications. But that is quite common, as we all seen those things in other parts of the world as well. But what is more exciting is about how startups come out with more creative solutions for problem solving. And one problem we know that when we are doing a smartphone application is that if you're running it in the browser itself on the smartphone, the performance can be a problem. Especially in like Asian countries, like people are kind of like more pragmatic, like they care about the development cost, the development cost, and as well as how can you find such good developers who can make it like work smoothly and no flickering problems. And so this startup called AppCan come up with a quite interesting solution. It's basically a hybrid smartphone solution, and it works for iOS, Android, and Windows 8. And it is a bit similar to PhoneGap, but it also has some kind of difference. So with this kind of solutions, like this has become like cliche, like web versus native, because this AppCan has basically a app engine. So basically you write your code in HTML5 and CSS3, and you can compile it into an app using the app engine. And it comes with a developer SDK as well as app analytics. And it has also its own push notification. But we all know that PhoneGap can pretty much do the same thing. So what is like the difference? Like if you're using PhoneGap, most probably you are building a all-in-one page application. So basically, it's in HTML that you compile it into a web view, and it works with jQuery and CentralTouch and other third-party frameworks, and it's open source. Well, this all-in-one page plus third-party UI framework approach has some pros and cons. The good thing is that this approach works fine in demos and small applications. But if you're building a large application, and which may require multi-views and no flickering transitions, then this becomes a little bit of a problem. And as we all know, this is how like a typical Android multi-webview development workplace looks like. That you have all these layout files, which is like the web views, and you have the Java activities that correspond to your layout. PhoneGap does have a solution, although it's not commonly used by people. For Android web views, PhoneGap uses Kadiva WebView, and for iOS web views, it uses Clever Component. But these are not really commonly used, and it's not like, but they work as more like components instead of the core application. And how AppCan does this is that by default, it has a multiple WebView API. And it has the native AppCan UI, which is a built-in UI framework. It's not open source at the moment, but it's kind of free to use. Basically, this is how the multiple WebView API looks like. So with this development SDK, you instead of having one index.html, you actually have like multiple HTMLs which work as different web views. And correspondingly, there is this JavaScript, which works as activity, and you have the UI framework built in as well. And because of there's something running in the background, so it solves the flickering problem as well when you are transiting from one web view to another. And this is how the UI framework API looks like. Basically, this is how the native API, UI API works. On a very basic layer, there's a resolution adapter class, and on top of that, you can find the base class, the color class, the layout, and resolution class. And also on top of that, you have the control class, which controls the buttons, list, fold, inputs, tab, radio box, checkbox, and switch classes. And you can write your own custom class as well. So which is better? I think I love PhoneGap for its open source nature, and the all-in-one page solution is really easy for like entry-level developers, and the flexibility is really great for top-level developers. AppCan is more like, it's a bit like a free enterprise product. It's good for mid-level developers, I think. So it's really your own choice, like what to use, but I think it's quite interesting to learn and to have a look at both, because they use different approaches, and I think they can learn a lot from each other. And there are a lot of quite interesting apps built by, just made in JavaScript itself in China. Like one of these is called like Daily Cost, and it's built in JavaScript, and it's written by just one single person, from the design to development and to the marketing itself. And it has like 500,000 downloads in the country. And well, if you say like, I don't even know about IE6 and 8 users, it's still fine. Because like in China and many Asian countries, like even the niche market is still like bigger than most countries' entire population, like Indonesia, China, Japan. So even if you just build like an application that's totally just, that only supports HTML5 but not other browsers, it still can be quite a hit. Like for instance, one music player built by a developer in China called Jingdao FM, which is quite interesting. It's like a music player built entirely in HTML5, and it has quite a lot of users. And also there's like a platform as a service for responsive web. One of the companies called Allmobilize in China. I think there are some quite of similar companies in the US and in the West as well. And basically, currently there are like hundreds of millions of web pages has been converted to responsive web pages by using this tool and many other software platforms. And there's this chat application called WeChat in China, which is quite similar to WhatsApp in the US or Line in Japan. But the difference is that it also has grown into an app store which supports HTML5 game development. So there are a lot of HTML5 game development companies in China that uses this web store to publish apps. And some of them are quite experimental at this stage, but slowly they're gaining like popularity. So the conclusion is that despite the fact that IE8 and 6 are probably still the most popular browsers in China, but there's increased support of HTML5 for the customers. And big tech companies are really adopting HTML5 technologies. And startups are also start to challenge the status quo and building really interesting applications using HTML5 technology. And here are just some like references I talked about, like the open source frameworks I built in the past, and as well as the company I talked about in China that builds the entire web OS on the browser itself, and also the one Chinese startup that builds the AppCan, which works a little bit like PhoneGap, but use a different approach. And basically, that's my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Shi. Sure. So we have time for a question or two. Does anyone have any questions? Hey, our speaker Simon here has a question.
Hey, thanks. Great talk. I've got two questions, actually.
All right.
One is you have a really big base of Windows XP in China, right? Mm-hmm. Are you finding the users on those machines are installing Chrome, or are they just staying with whatever they got? Second question is, is AppCan localized into English, or is it only available in Chinese?
Sorry, you mean like?
If I want to use AppCan,
Uh-huh.
is the interface in Chinese or English, or the documentation?
Yeah, the documentation is a product problem. Yeah, it's still in Chinese, but you can ask me probably.
Okay.
Yeah, and also the JavaScript, everybody can understand JavaScript. So yeah, that is it's gonna be you can always view the source code. Yeah, and with a little bit of guessing, you can know how it works. Yeah, that is the kind of like a problem in China. Is like most developers don't share that much with the rest of the world.
Right.
Although they are building some quite awesome applications and frameworks. Yeah, and I probably can try to talk to them if they can, have an English translation or something.
Yeah, we're not providing Chinese translations anyway, so. So what about the Windows XP base and Chrome? Are people installing modern browsers into their computers, or are they staying with their old browsers? So you have a lot of Windows XP users in China, right?
Sorry, you mean?
Windows XP.
Yeah. There are a lot of Windows XP in China.
Are people installing modern browsers into that? So are they installing Chrome onto XP, or are they staying with IE?
It's very complicated in China. So there are a lot of local browsers as well, like built by the Chinese companies, tech companies. But they actually use the Chrome engine, most of them.
Right.
Yeah. So it's very complicated, and there's still a lot of IE in China, and it's not going to disappear in a very short period of time.
It's not going away. 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's not going off.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, like in China, there are a lot of smartphone customers. So people spending most of the time to browse on a smartphone or a tablet instead of on their desktop. So this creates a huge opportunity for web developers to try to come up with solutions to work around with smartphone devices. So which is like a lot of developers now currently develop HTML5 applications on the smartphone. And like AppCan is one example, and a lot of developers uses PhoneGap as well, and also a lot of apps are just running in the browser itself, like use responsive web approaches. Yeah.
Great, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for questions today for Shi. If you do have any more questions, hop on over to the chat, and you could also approach Shi over at the coffee break later on.